Welcome to episode 2 of Everse Chat. This episode is brought to you by my house shoes, keeping my feet warm since 2017.
Everse chat.
Welcome back to Everse Chat. This is episode 2. Today we are going to talk about two different topics, two very popular topics. The first one is the jump. So what is it like to actually transition from your 9 to 5 to full-time doing your own thing? And second, we're going to follow up with the concept of the roller coaster. I talked about this very briefly in episode 0, and I just want to dive into it a little bit more. Stay tuned to the end. I'm going to introduce a very special guest and a special series that we're going to kick things off with, and then also introduce a kind of challenge that I want to incorporate into Everse Chat. So hang around and hope you enjoy the show. So, taking the jump. I guess I'll start with sharing my story. So, my story is pretty funny. So, of course, we started our business in 2010. That does not mean, of course, we started right at 2010 and I just never got a job. I had odd jobs right out of college. I worked at Marriott. I worked at Walgreens. I think those were the only two. There's probably some other stuff in there. Oh yeah, I worked at, it was like this crazy call center. I don't even know if they still exist. I'm pretty sure they were doing some illegal stuff with like home inspections, but I don't know. I was probably there for like a week and we did not get along. But yeah, so before I was a full-time entrepreneur, I was what many people are, which is just kind of a part-time entrepreneur. You do it after work, you do it in between work, it breaks. If you're fortunate enough or you just don't get caught, you do it while you're at work. But yeah, so that was me in almost every single regard. So yeah, I had all those odd jobs, which created a whole different mess of baggage for us to unpack later on. But long story short, my last job, I worked at a school, and I picked that job because it gave me the time I needed to really focus on building the business. It was very flexible. We could, go out and, cruise around and we were, I don't even know what the job really was. It doesn't exist anymore. It was whoever thought it out. Really, I think they were just going after grant money. I have no idea, but I liked it because it gave me a lot of time. And, I started getting to that point. I remember it was like, I think it was like October. And, I said, hey, I just had a really honest conversation with myself, and I said, you can't do both anymore. There's no way you can continue to work at this school and also grow your business. One of them is going to suffer, and I think I would much rather, the job that doesn't really need me suffer than the job that I've spent at this point, like 4 or 5 years building. So go in and I say, hey, look, it's been great. I've had this business and it's just getting to a point where, I need to focus full time on that. And I remember the principal was she was kind of like, well, hey, you should stay a little bit. You should stay longer. And said, well, I really should get going after, the 2 weeks that I'm trying to give you. And she said, hey, how about this? You stay until the end of the year. And I said, nah, I don't know if I can do that. Well, just stay until December. And I said, okay. Me being a softie, I said, okay. Instead of giving my 2 weeks, I would have been done by Halloween. I elected to stay, and it was terrible. The the concept of he who chases two rabbits catches none totally applied here. Um, so I started showing up like super late because I would still have to be working my business during those hours and after hours, and I would be tired, so I would come in. I think school started at I don't know, it was some crazy time. Now that I think about it, it was like 7 o'clock. I would come in at like 10, and, and I would do that for weeks and weeks and weeks, and then one day, everybody just started acting really cold towards me, and I was like, well, hey, what's up? What's wrong with you guys? And then the principal called me in her office, and she was like, well, I think that we're going to go ahead and discontinue your contract. And the range of emotions that went through my brain when this lady sat here and looked at me and was like, well, basically, we're firing you. I was happy because I finally got to leave like a month and a half after when I said I wanted to leave. I was kind of mad in a overachiever sort of way that I was being fired. But at the same time, I was kind of like, I told you so. It was weird. So yeah, got fired. And then literally the next day, I was just like, hey, I'm free. I have all this time. And, things really took off after that. So my jump was a little bit more of a weird, like, have you ever seen those those videos where someone's like jumping off a high, like a diving board, and they don't really know, like if they want to jump and they commit to it, but then by the time the springboard's in a weird place, and then they just kind of flop. That was my jump. So it was like a push jump fall kind of thing. But yeah, so I've been fired before, and I think that a lot of entrepreneurs probably have a similar experience where they just reach that critical point where there's no way that they can do both, and it can be very terrifying to try to do both. So you kind of hang on for too long, and that's one thing that can happen. So just thinking about my experience, I have a question. So do you think it's right to use a job as a stepping stone, or is that a indicator of a person of low integrity and whatever you want to call it? I don't know. I mean, personally, I feel like the nature of a employment relationship at large, not all of them, some are very genuine, and they have their own intrinsic motivations, but the majority of them are contracts. You have an employment contract, and it is an exchange for work. I will hire you to do this job for X amount of money for X amount of time. And after that time, or at any of our mutual consent or unilateral consent, we can just say, up, see you later, bye, we don't need you. So, that's kind of how I looked at those types of jobs, and that's how I used them, whether it was Walgreens, whether it was a school district, whether it was Marriott. They were really means for an end for me because I knew that wasn't my final career trajectory. So I'm curious to see what other people think. I have a feeling that some people have more of a sense of duty to just do the best they can. I know that is more of an old school thought. My father is really like that. So when my brother and I told him we were going into business together, he was kind of like, well, you should probably still have a day job, and you need to commit to that, 100%. And then once you build up enough, then you can just leave. And I don't know, to me that seemed really, really risky. Like, commit all this time and effort and energy, and then at some succinct point just chop it off. versus have at least some sort of safety net. So up to debate. I think that a lot of people will think differently, but I don't know. Okay, so moving on here. Um, this really, taking the jump really leads into another concept. I guess this episode is really about the big scary things of entrepreneurship and starting, and I find it appropriate that this is in the beginning of this podcast series. But you know, the roller coaster associated with entrepreneurship is 100% real. I know, well, there may be this perception out there that, if you have a really good idea, do you become successful in entrepreneurship? And I think that that is kind of misleading because, some people, you never really know in a vacuum if your idea is good or great. You can always assume that it is, and you should always have faith in yourself that you can bring a good idea to market or to a community, whatever it may be. But you never really know until you get there. You can do market research, you can do focus groups. It really doesn't matter. But when you know, pedal to the metal, whatever, meets the road, whatever the heck you're gonna call it. Once you get out there, that's when you really figure out if it's good or not. And a lot of people, I feel, go into business ownership with this idea of it's either going to be all great or I'm not going to make any money. And I think in reality, you're somewhere in the middle. There have been people that I've met that multimillionaires that say, "Well, hey, I started off super successful, and I made millions and millions of dollars, and I thought I had it all figured out, and then over the course of a month, I lost it all. Whether it's bad investments, whether it's just other just the weird Game of Thrones politics that sometimes happen in business. They lost it all, and then they rebuild it. And you sit there and you wonder, like, why in the world would anybody put themselves through that? My opinion, when you think about it, it's not so different from any other job. You have a little bit more control over what happens, but the market is your boss to a certain extent, and the market can one day say, "Hey, I don't need you." Uh, I think that as an entrepreneur, a you have the skills and you have the resources to actually see that coming to a degree, and prepare yourself. I think that that is a huge distinction between being employed and being an employer, or even just being self-employed, is that degree of control over when and how and if things end or transform, change, whatever you want to call it. But but yeah, that transition is definitely something that is terrifying, and it is not something that is definitive either, which makes it even more terrifying. The roller coaster is such that one day you're just ecstatic because you just signed this you know $1 million contract, and it's over the term of 3 years, and then you hit these pits where you get into reality of things like, okay, well, I have this contract, but no one's paying, or what the heck is going on? I'm gonna be broke. I thought I could put all my hope in this basket, and now what's going on? I think the solution to that conundrum is really to place your hope in multiple baskets, and not all of those baskets need to be monetary, or on a monetary basis. So sometimes you need to develop new projects, sometimes you need to end new projects, sometimes you need to really focus on growing existing things. And in that way, while you're riding a roller coaster on some new, latest and greatest, you also are creating a new up for a new project, or for an existing project, or wrapping up some bit of business that's been causing you a lot of stress. So yeah, it really is a balancing act, but I think that as you progress down an entrepreneurial journey, you become comfortable and familiar with the roller coaster, and those steep falls aren't so bad because you know how to prepare yourself mentally for them. All right, that's all the time we have today. Again, comments, questions, anything, really helps develop this show and bring it to where it needs to be, where you want it to be. So go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. Well, if you don't like it, then I guess you would hit the thumbs down, but whatever. Hit the subscribe button, definitely the alert button. That way you can stay up to date on any new episodes. Also, we will be starting a new series with a guest speaker that will be on 3 different episodes, the 3 upcoming episodes, and we'll just be really chopping it up. It's a good friend of mine out in Houston, headed out there pretty soon, and hey, it'll be fun. Saru thinks it's fun. That was him shaking his face. So, yep, again, hit the subscribe button, and I will talk to you guys later. See ya.